Good morning. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the topic of opportunism and accountability in advertising. Now, in honor of our theme, Turning Points in 20th Century America, it only seemed appropriate to begin my remarks neither in the 20th century nor in America. Rather, we're going to begin in London in 1864. Now, a man's returning home from work, and as he approaches home, there's a courier standing outside his door, and he places a telegram in the man's hand. Well, typically at this point in time, telegrams weren't the cheapest thing to send, so to receive one implied one of two things, either importance or urgency. So you can understand the man's reaction whenever he actually receives the telegram expecting something important, and instead he sees this. It says, Gabriel Dentist at 27 Harley Street in Cavendish Square until October are open from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. So here we have our first documented form of spam. Telegram spam, nonetheless, right? Now, this man does what any of us might. He sits down with a pen and a piece of paper, and he writes his local Times paper. And he says, I've never had any dealings with Gabriel Dentists. By what right are they messaging me? By something that is simply a means of advertisement. And I like this part. A word from you, I would feel sure, would put a stop to this intolerable nuisance. So, within hours of the first spam message, we have our first mark as spam. Now, interestingly, spam didn't exist as a term in 1864. That's a phrase we wouldn't actually get until the 1990s, in response to, of all things, a 1970s Monty Python sketch. All right? Now, in this sketch, a couple of diners walk into a diner and start having a conversation with the waitress. And they ask the waitress, what's on the menu? And as the waitress goes through, everything has spam in it. There's spam and eggs, spam and eggs, spam bacon, spam and eggs. And in that moment, we also have a group of Vikings sitting off to the side. And every time that waitress says spam, the Vikings start singing spam, 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 wonderful spam. It gets to the point that it drowns out all other significant, meaningful conversation in the restaurant. So it's understandable then in the 1990s why the perception of spam in that encounter would be applied to marketing and advertising. It drowns out all other communication. I would imagine folks in the 1980s probably felt the same when you're working in a business office and you walk up to the actual fax machine to pull off something that you think is important, and you're flipping through and you find a full-page ad encouraging you to take a vacation to Barbados, right? So we also had spam reemerge in the 1980s with fax machines. Then, of course, we all know our inboxes are filled today with email spam. And to jump to today, we actually see that the estimate is that 45 to 73% of all messages sent are spam. And on a daily basis, approximately 70 billion spam messages are sent globally. If you think about this in terms of direct mail, all of that junk mail that you get to your house, did you realize that more than 62 billion pieces of junk mail are produced each year, which is the equivalent of 4 million tons? Right? Now, marketers aren't nearly as cute as this picture of this puppy up here, but they do have quite the storied history of being places often before customers even truly arrive. For example, with the emergence of automobiles, advertisers were very quick to the game to put billboards up along the roadways. Or we see the first TV ad show up in 1941 before a Dodger-Phillies baseball game. And the ad says America runs on Bulova time, which apparently means 18 years before TVs even reach 90% of American households. Or how about web banner ads? This was in 1994, and advertisers were already on the game when there were a grand total of 2,700 websites on the World Wide Web, compared to approximately 1 billion today. Now, we can't talk about the opportunism of advertisers without also talking about the messaging side of it. So advertisers, leading into the 1900s, there were a lot of snake oil salesmen out there, right? Peddling wares, medical products, things that would cure anything that ails you. So you would find things like this cocaine toothache drop, right? Or how about this one? This is Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. It says the mother's friend for teething children. So when you have that child that can't sleep because their teeth are coming in, give them some of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. Of course, the main ingredients here are alcohol and morphine. So those babies probably slept pretty well, right? But you see this with most of the things, or many of the things that were actually being peddled at that point in time, that often the leading ingredient was alcohol, and occasionally things that were so toxic that they actually did more harm than the thing that they were purported to cure. This one right here for Horsford's acid phosphate actually isn't as bad as what you might think it is. This is actually a flavoring agent that was used in soda early on. It was often found at soda stations, drink fountains at drugstores. But the humor here is that they were actually advertising the fact that, here, basically drink a soda and it will help protect you from cholera, right? So this is kind of flipping the other direction. And then when we reach the mid-1900s, we see advertisers take a little bit different approach, still related to the health aspect of things, but this is an actual cigarette ad from the mid-1900s where Camel says, hey, we did a survey of all of the doctors in the country, and we found that among all the doctors, the preferred cigarette of choice is Camel cigarettes. So if you don't know why they're awesome, now you know. Now, I love the attention to detail in this ad because they even emphasize to really sell that red M and that red D for that MD, right? They want to nail home the medical benefits of this. Meanwhile, in the lower corner, we've got this lovely-looking woman where it emphasizes the T-zone of her face, that part that gives you the beautiful, youthful appearance that you have, emphasizing how healthy this will make you look and feel. Of course, alcohol distributors get in on the game as well. So we see them encouraging you to find fresh strength and life in every glass. Really have to appreciate this one because in this one, Rainier Beer even encourages you to start nurturing that drinking habit in your child while they're young. Right? Nothing says family bonding like a grandfather and a granddaughter clinking glasses. Now, the thing that all of these things have in common is that leading into the 1900s, these issues with snake oil salesmen and the medical claims leads to the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. And when you get to the issues with cigarette advertising and alcohol advertising, cigarette advertising leads in 1965 to the Cigarette Labeling and Advertising Act, which is actually amended 4 years after that to completely banish cigarette advertising on TV and radio. And then even going back to our example of spam, spam actually led to a couple of laws for us. One was in 1991. It's actually a Telephone Consumer Protection Act, which affected things like telemarketing. It extends today into things like text messaging restrictions, and it applied to fax machine spam. But then when we get to 2003, we see the CAN-SPAM Act, which specifically starts telling advertisers what they can and can't include in email messages, and requirements of things like the fact that they have to provide an unsubscribe for you to opt out of it if you don't want to receive it. Now today, you know that when you see an ad, you have the assurance from all of these laws that that the ads are expected to be truthful, they can't be misleading, and where possible, they have to be supported by scientific evidence. Now, we also see that law has advanced so far that we have specific advertising laws present in a number of specific industries: airlines and travel, alcohol, marketing to children, clothing and textiles, energy and environment, food, drugs and cosmetics, funerals, jewelry and art, mail, email, phone and fax, money and finance, tobacco products, and thankfully work-at-home programs. All right, so we've got quite the lengthy list here. Now we'll transition for just a moment because I like this quote from Otto von Bismarck, who's actually a Prussian leader. It says, "Only a fool learns from his own mistakes. The wise man learns from the mistakes of others." Thankfully, advertisers do learn from history. We have organizations now, like the American Marketing Association, and we have companies that work with them, that actively work to police themselves and put in place industry best practices, because they've come to realize that one of the best ways to keep laws from being written that hamper your ability to do your job is to actually be proactive and restrict yourselves from doing certain things to begin with. So this is the preamble of the American Marketing Association's mission statement that says that they're to be stewards of society, to embrace the highest professional ethical norms and ethical values implied by their responsibility toward customers, employees, investors, and peers. Now, this accountability comes at an opportune time because historically, advertisers had been in the business of trying to be everywhere because the aim was to be seen by everyone. How can you sell a product if you don't? I like this quote from Stuart Henderson Britt, who said, "Doing business without advertising is like winking at a girl in the dark. You know what you're doing, but nobody else does." Right? But at the same time, Advertisers had this reality. Like this department store merchant, John Wanamaker, said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. So all of that opportunism that we saw with advertisers also created the problem that it creates a lot of waste. So we enter at the end of the 1900s in 1999, an era when the phrase Internet of Things is first coined. Now, Internet of Things, just to kind of set the stage for me, imagine, if you will, for a moment, that you're walking through the grocery store to fill up whatever it is that you need for the house, and as you're walking through, you realize, I don't know if I have milk in the refrigerator. Do I get milk? Well, hold on, let me pull out my phone. I'm going to call someone at home. Let's see if they can look and see if there's milk. You can't get hold of someone. So you decide, I don't want to spend the extra $4 on a gallon of milk. You go home that night to have that evening bowl of cereal and realize, no milk, right? Now imagine instead that you're walking through the grocery store, and when you can't get hold of someone on the phone, you pull out your phone instead and you log into your refrigerator. Now your refrigerator tracks the actual codes on the items that are in there and tells you what's in inventory. So when you say, hey, do I have milk? Your fridge tells you, no, you don't have milk, and by the way, here's a coupon for one that's on sale at your local grocer. So you pick up the milk, you get a discount, you go home happy, right? The Internet of Things is basically any item, whether it be a vehicle, a building, any object that you may have in your possession, that because of network connectivity is able to gather and share data. Experts estimate that by the year 2020, more than 50 billion items will be on the Internet of Things. Meanwhile, we're in the era of big data. Companies like never before are looking at information to determine how to actually sell you products. So they're using consumer psychology tied into when they make an offer for you. Think of it like a Rube Goldberg machine. Here, advertisers are able to look at a particular action or a series of actions by you or other individuals online, and then determine what ads, what offers, and what sort of things they should serve up to you to make you more able or more capable of actually making a purchase. So when we consider all of these things in combination, going back from the very beginning, we see advertisers spamming, giving you as many messages as they possibly can, trying to be everywhere, being held accountable by the government, eventually learning to self-regulate. It leads to an important opportunity now today with this data. That self-regulation is important because advertisers have come to a place where now they're actually the ones who are beginning to initiate a little bit of pushback when government is seeking to come back the other direction for data. But at the same time, it allows advertisers to do one very important thing. Rather than being noise and disrupting your habits on a daily basis, they're able to be more strategic and tactical to serve to you the ads that you want to see when you want to see them. Thank you.